kind of was holding that, and he posed in that, and they made this widespread poster like that. It was just really, really cool. I had one, and it was just really neat. But there's some things about Bo that people didn't realize. You know, they did this thing about Bo knows best. Bo knows this, Bo knows that. He did a interview with Sports Illustrated, and they did an article about him. And I want you to really think about what he says here. He is a Hall of Famer in both sports, one of the greatest that has ever lived, and this is what he says. My father has never seen me play a professional baseball or football. I tried to have a relationship with him, gave him my number, said, Dad, call me, I'll fly you in. Can you imagine? I'm Bo Jackson, one of the so-called premier athletes in the country, and I'm sitting in the locker room and envying every one of my teammates whose dad would come in and talk. I never experienced that. We talked about this morning about we're sending people off on a journey and having something new to happen in our life, and letting let something like that be part of a wonderful experience that we had. My parents moved to Amory because they wanted to be part of this experience with our grandkids. They wanted to help out. They wanted to be part of it because for so long, Les and I sat back and we saw so many parents get to just we were sitting there envying just the fact that their kids had their grandparents and they could just go over there, and grandparents were able to help, and meals over at the grandparents' house, and all these things were taking place. We're sitting there going, well, man, we don't have any of that. We just have, nobody really as far as family. And then my dad called and said, hey, we want to move over. And that was special because they want to be part of our life. They want to be part of our journey. They wanted to come over and help. They wanted to be part of that. And so imagine somebody like Bo Jackson, who everybody in the world would have wanted to be in that locker room to ask him questions, to be part of that experience and all that. People would pay tons of money to get that and to be part of that. But his dad didn't want to have anything to do with it. Didn't want to be in the locker room, didn't want to experience that new chapter in his life, didn't want to experience that journey. And so when we think about what we've got and what our kids going to be doing, I just started to think about here, because we're talking about advice like this morning. There are things that all children needs from parents, and that we have a critical role and a critical responsibility for them and to them. And so I kind of want to talk about that for a minute. So go to Proverbs Chapter 4. Proverbs Chapter 4. I think in this you could see in this chapter where as parents, and you may agree with this, I don't know, but we find ourselves being a teacher, a cheerleader, and really a coach in these. And so I kind of want to look at that just for a minute. Proverbs chapter 4, we'll read the first 4 verses here. Hear, O sons, a father instructions, and be attentive that you may gain insight, for I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words, keep my commandments, and live. All right, parents. If you were to teach your kids some life lessons, what would be some life lessons you would want to teach your kids? And let's say for right now, not in so much of a spiritual sense, but what are just some life lessons you'd want your grandkids and your kids to know? I'll give you a hint. Walker has been, for now it seems like, ever since he got his license, he's like, Dad, you show me how to change your tire. How do you change the tire on a truck? It's a good life lesson. So I decided the other night, because he was driving down to the coast, I'm going to show him how to change a tire. So I showed him all the way of how to change it till I get to how do you get to the spare. And I was about to lose it. I had that right. So now, son, what you do, you take this rod and you put it right there in that hole right there, and you're going to feel it latch. You fit. Couldn't get it to work. So I get the manual out. I read the manual. I'm doing everything right. Couldn't find it. I said, son, this is probably the most important thing you got to do is get the spare. You can get the tire off. And boy, if you don't have the spare, you're going to be stuck out there in the middle of the night and not be able to go anywhere. Well, Dad, what are you going to do? I got an idea. Shane, hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just here by myself. What you got? I said, well, I can't get the spare off my tire. I'm trying to show Walker how to change the tire. And he said, all right, I'm coming. Shane gets over there. See, what you got to do, Derrick, is you got to angle it. Then you got to put it in. Why didn't the manual tell you that? Why does the picture, you literally just go straight? Just show straight. Not Shane. He goes up there, turns sideways, and then you could find it. All right, we get that, and I'm telling him where to put the jack. Shane goes, well, Derrick, since your truck's a little bit higher, you really don't need to put that jack there because you're not going to have enough to get up there. I'm sitting there going, you know what, Shane, you just tell my son how to change a tire. So he does. He shows him how to properly change a tire. And I'm sitting there learning. Okay, really, I need to put it right here, and then I need to put it there. We would have been in trouble. Life lessons that we need to teach our kids, how to change a flat. Felt good about myself when I was down on the coast, and Leslie and I think it was Tina or Heather or something. I think it was Tina. We had a blowout there on the coast. I changed the tire. I said, son, I can show you how. I know how to do it. Shane taught my son how to change a tire. What are some life lessons you want your kids or grandkids to know? All right, if you start a job, finish it. I'm going to be honest, I'm really good at starting, and I'm really good at going halfway. But then if it gets tough, I'm like, Shane, can you finish this for me? What are some other life lessons you think that kids, your grandkids, that they need to learn? Be sure the spare tire has air in it. That's true. I didn't, Walker, seriously, check it. They're going, how do you check it? I'll give you Shane's number. What else? Tommy, you were going to say something. You had your hand raised.
I would tell my children, my boys, what my daddy told me many, many times. There's no substitute for doing what's right.
There's no substitute for doing what's right. I like that. Y'all think about that for a little bit. No substitute for doing something right. I tell you something that my dad, of course, this is the accounting in him. Life lesson number probably 50 was budget. I mean, he showed number one was church. This is how his went. When you saw his budget was number one was the amount he gave to the church. Then it was 2, house, number 3, car, 4, and it went down like that. That was his budget, and it was on a weekly deal, monthly deal, and that's how. So I knew that the church better be up there pretty high when it comes to the budget. So I would say life lesson is knowing how to budget, and really most importantly is where is God in this budget. All right, any other life lessons you'd want? We're not going to say that out loud. They didn't have cameras back then. Becky said take plenty of pictures. Memories, right? Memories. Anything else? You need to learn how to cook. I was listening to a radio show the other day, and they were talking about how a 35-year-old man still has his mom come over and wash clothes because he had no clue how to wash his own clothes. May want to learn how to do that. I can honestly say Braden knows how to make an omelet now. It may not look good. It may not even taste good, but he knows how to do an omelet. Do you know how to wash clothes, Braden? He doesn't. All right, that's the next thing. First, most important is you better learn how to cook. Then we'll worry about washing. I know Walker knows how to wash because he does some of his washing. All right, know how to wash, cook. Anything else before we move on? Life lessons. So, all right, let me ask you this. When I think about our responsibility as a teacher, as a parent teaching our kids, not only what are some life lessons, but things that are holy and things that are true, what would you say are some pillars of faith? We have been discussing and we'll be meeting with many of you about some pillars in ministry that has to be laid as far as for ministry to be successful. What about in our kids' lives? What are some pillars of faith that you feel like is needed? I've got about 6, 7 things that I wrote down here, but for you, what are some, if you were to share with your kids, grandkids, what are some pillars of faith that you feel like that is extremely important, that you want them to know? First John chapter 5 and verse 3 talks about obedience. If you love me, you're going to keep my commandments. I would say that obedience is one of those pillars of faith, something that is needed. What else? What else do you feel like? I gave you one. What is something else that you think is needed? What are you teaching your grandkids? I mean, I know in teaching your kids, I know that there are some life lessons we want them to know. All right, like say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, open the door, don't walk in front of it. You know, there's some things that we want to try to teach our kids. But what about faith-wise? What are things that just pop in your head that you want them to know? Do I now? All right, so a life pillar is being in the presence of God and sharing with that presence of God. Hey, we want you to go with evangelizing to them. So at the end of the day, this man had asked his daughter and said, "Hey, if somebody was to ask you, what is it that that I could leave you, or that I've left you, what would it be? What would you say that I've left you?" And she says 3 things. And I'm going to share that here in a minute. What are those things that you would share with them? Heaven. And then I want other people to go to heaven. What are some other pillars? All right, teach them how to pray. Prayer. How do you communicate to your Father? We just had a whole month or 2, if not longer, on prayer. And I think sometimes, we may forget to do that. What is the best way to teach a kid how to pray? Do what? By example, pray. If you want your kid to have a life where he communicates to God, then just pray every day with them. Pray at the table, pray before they go to bed, before you head off on a trip, before we go down to the coast, we said a prayer. You say prayers. My dad, man, they say prayers all the time. Man, if they're going to go to Walmart, they're going to probably say a prayer. And it's just constant. And I saw that all the time. I don't pray anywhere as much as they do, and I should. But if you want your kids to learn how to pray, you better start praying in your home. All right, what's another pillar of faith? Yeah, I think without a doubt. One is communicating to God, and the other one's listening to God. And if you ever want to hear God speak, you've got to study. You got to study His Word, and you got to open it up. You got to study to show yourselves approved. You got to be able to rightly divide those things. So, I think that is it. I think that's really, that's big. You want to talk about stepping on toes, and probably even my toes. We force our kids to prepare for class the next day. You can ask them, well, how many times we come in and say, have you done your homework? Have you studied for that test yet? Have you done that? How often do we say that to our kids? Hey, have you prayed to God today? Have you studied today? Right. If the only time you learn God is the 3 hours that we are together, then I'm going to say your faith is weak, period. And I can almost debate you in that every single time. That if all you have is when we come to worship tonight and Wednesday night, then I'm going to say your faith is pretty shallow. All right, but if it is every day, then I'm going to say your faith is in continually walk with God. Here, hold on. Do you want to just, before we get in trouble? All right, so something else that was brought up there is how often do we see the importance of the church and being together? We're not going to get off into this, what if you miss this time or what if you miss this time? Because, let's be honest, the elders could very easily decide that we meet every single day. The elders could decide. That's why we meet on Wednesday night, because the elders decide, and that's the reason why we meet on Sunday night. We don't have an example of that in the Scriptures. We just have an example of that they met daily in homes. What if the elders decided that we meet every single night for 2 hours? And so what we have is are we teaching our kids to, if the elders did decide that, would we come? Come not just because, hey, they said it, but come because of the benefit of getting to be together. So I think that is a strong pillar that needs to be talked about. Some things I wrote down is humility, James chapter 4 and verse 10. Selfless love, 1 Corinthians 13 that Paul talks about. A pillar of faith would be just pure forgiveness, teaching our kids and ourselves what forgiveness is about. Self-discipline, gratitude, and even Colossians chapter 3, 14 and following, worship. I think these are things in which, as the proverb writer in verses 1 through 4 teaches us, that we should just teach them the pillars of faith. Here's some life lessons you need to know, but here's some things that you need to know in your faith. How many of you, whenever your children were born, were wondering if there was a manual? Really a manual on some things? I've heard people, we all wish there was some form of a perfect manual as far as the, how do you properly, which I would call burrito wrap a baby, which I became really good at it. But, you do, Derrick, there are books to know how to do it. I really think teaching here is we have to leave a manual for our kids. We have to leave them something in which they will have to know. And maybe not written down. It doesn't have to be in some spreadsheet form or whatever. But then today, if they were to be asked, here's what they would say. So that one is, the first one there is a teacher. The second thing we see, starting in verse 5, get wisdom, and in Proverbs 4, get wisdom, get insight, do not forget, and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. So I mean, this is if you were to cheer on your kid for something, to get something, I mean, this is the thing to get, all right? And playing basketball and really during that time, I mean, that's the purpose of cheerleaders. It's really to encourage you to be better than where you are. And really, that's what our responsibility is. You know, I want my boys to be the best version of them, to be the best that they can be. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but I mean, that is, I don't need them to be anybody else. Here's how God made you and created you, so I want you to be the best version of that right there. I'm not a 110% guy. I'm always 100%. It's impossible to do 10% more. All right, and so it's 100% of the best version that God intended you to be. And so within that, what is it that we want them to be the best at, or for them to have? And this proverb writer says this: wisdom. Encourage them to want wisdom. What's the difference between wisdom and knowledge? Bobby? Oh, sorry. Bobby raised his hand, so he might give it to him.
Knowledge is no difference between that a tomato's a fruit, not a vegetable. Wisdom is to know that it goes on a fruit salad.
Yeah, I love that. I was actually thinking more like a gun. Knowledge is know how to work a gun. Wisdom would know that once you have the gun, whether or not what is right and wrong with that gun. Or the tomato. Say that again. Hold on. I'm going to actually let everybody hear that. Man, I'm thinking more. I should be thinking about food, but.
Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit and not a vegetable. Wisdom is knowing that it doesn't belong in a fruit salad.
That's wisdom, knowing not to be in the fruit salad. Yeah. So wisdom is being able to know what is right and wrong. It's to be able to be the judge of what is right. Knowledge can be sustained through life experiences or you learning something. The Jews knew about God but had trouble with the wisdom of what is right and wrong. And Proverbs verse 9, I want to look at some of these. Proverbs chapter 9, 11, and 12. I want you to listen to how powerful wisdom is. For by me your days will be multiplied and years will be added to your life. If you are wise for yourself. If you scoff, you alone will bear it. It gives this reference of wisdom multiplies your days. I want my boys to have knowledge. I want them to know about God, but more than anything, they need to gain wisdom. They need to know that here's what's right, here's what's wrong. That's probably what, in dealing with the gun, that's the problem with so many people today. They know how to work a gun, but they don't know what happens when they pull that trigger and it takes that life away. They don't know the effects that it has on a family member and a family member and a family member. Or drugs. They have all the knowledge of what that drug is and what it does, but they don't have the wisdom of how it literally tears their life apart. But with wisdom, and they act on it, it adds days after days. This is what I thought was pretty cool in Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 19. Listen to this. Was there anything before the earth was created other than God? What would you say? All right. Here's what Proverbs 3 and verse 19 says. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. What was created before earth? Wisdom. Wisdom was before the creation of this world. God, through his wisdom, created it. So if there is something that I want my boys or you want your grandkids to know what is extremely important, it's wisdom. It was even before time, before this was created. So why not have it? Proverbs chapter 2, 10 through 12 says, "For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you, understanding will guard you." If you have wisdom, you have knowledge, but because you have knowledge doesn't mean you have wisdom. You gain wisdom, knowledge is there. You may have knowledge, but it does not mean you have wisdom. And so I think that is really, really key and important when we look at, if we're going to cheer our family on and cheer our kids on to something better, why don't we look at cheering them on and gaining wisdom? That starts with us. And then in that text it says for them in verse 1 to listen and pay attention. That falls on who? Them. Us is providing the manual. Them, it's for them to listen. It's for them to pay attention. And it's the same for us. It's for me. I need to listen and pay attention to those who may be wiser, those who are a little bit further down the road that understand things. So that's where that plays. And the last thing we find in starting verse 10 of Proverbs 4. "Hear, my son, accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the path of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instructions. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong, and they are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble." Verse 23, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." What makes a good coach? I think there are three very important things that make a good coach. And verse 10 and 11 tells us the first one. That is, they are a good model to follow. Anytime a coach goes into an interview, one of the things they're looking at is they want to see, will a kid have a good role model for that kid to follow? Anytime you go to an interview and you want to see something, whether it is with a coach or a teacher or a minister, whatever it is, do people need to follow that person? Because it's just going to happen. People are going to follow them. And so, are they said as dads, Bo Jackson didn't have a dad to follow. He didn't have a role model to follow in the sense of a dad. I'm sure he had somebody that he ended up, moving towards. But in this one, he says, how important is it for us? Verse 10 and 11. "Accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom." There's a model for him to follow. The second thing a good coach is to set some really clear boundaries. I've now been a chaplain for the Amory football since 2001, so for 20-something years, and I've watched at least 4 coaches come through. Every one of them will begin telling them some form of boundaries. Here are my rules. This is what I want. This is what I expect. This is how you're to behave. This is how you're supposed to treat us, how you're supposed to treat others. This is the rule book that I want you. Here are my offensive plays. Here are my defensive plays. You're not to go past this. I don't care about your opinion and what you think about. This is what I want to be set. And I think if there's anything that I think sometimes dads fail at this, is setting the clear boundaries on things. Clear boundaries. 14 and 15. "Do not enter the path of wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on." My parents were very clear on certain paths and boundaries. I mean, sometimes to the extreme. You knew how they stand and what will happen if you cross this line. And I think sometimes it has become kind of, we blur it, and we really don't know. And kids sometimes are given the right to choose on whether or not this is something that is right or wrong, if this is wicked or not wicked. And I think this is where, if we're going to be the right role models and if we're a coach in their life, we've got to set boundaries for our kids, because once they leave that house, they're going to be able to make their own decisions in that. And so I think that is extremely important. No is sometimes a word that is not used. I know some of you are shocked, but really, there are parents who do not believe in saying no. Leslie and I know some people. They don't want to say no because they don't want to have to deal with the problem. Maybe using the words like "you're not allowed" is not used, but needs to be used. Stop. Those are clear boundaries to try to keep somebody from being hurt. This proverb writer says, hey, do not, or actually just keep hold, or do not enter the path of the wicked. Avoid it. The last thing is this encouragement of a godly spirit. So the dad asked the little girl and said, if somebody was to ask you, what is it about me that you'll always remember? And the little girl said, well, the first one is this, that you always tell me that you love me. You always provide a lunch for me. And said that you've always said that we will see each other and be together in heaven. I think that is really, I think that's one of the key things. What will they remember that you have told them? Will they remember more of life lessons, like how to change a tire, how to change the oil, how to set a budget? Will they remember more of that, which I think is extremely important? But will they know that more than real life, spiritual pillars of faith that they need in their life? This little girl knows constantly that his daddy always says that he loves me, daddy always makes me lunch, and daddy always says I'll see him in heaven. That's spiritual. How often do we do that to our kids and for our kids? Any comments? Any comments? Shane, if you don't mind, check the radar for me while I go over these announcements so I can see what we're going to need to do for tonight. Anybody have a bulletin on them? There we go. Thank you. I do want to, I know that with Larry, I talked to him. I think everything's clear as far as it not being a heart attack, and so that is good. But maybe a little. Has anybody heard anything else in the last hour or two? I think it may be a little vertigo issue and some others. I know they want him to do an MRI. I think it was, but I don't know if they're going to do one. But everything is coming out clear as far as with Brother Larry. And I think they're wanting to take Randall home, but I think they're also probably need to keep him in there a couple more days. But he is doing better. I think he is. Cassie said they were going to go home within 5 minutes, and that was 4 hours ago. So he may be home now. Does anybody know? So he's doing better. Well, Ms. Kate, you got a whole book written on this thing. Yeah, y'all get serious in the ladies' class. Who's Brenda Price? Brenda Price? You got to tilt the head for some of them. All right, I know the teenagers are singing in the park there at Winfield. They'll be leaving. Y'all, prayers go out. Be careful on that trip. Shane, do we know anything about the radar? All right, well, will you send a message to Core and say that the event is held here at the building, and we'll do the blow-ups in the fellowship, in the gym, and we will cook and grill out here. Everything will be moved over here. If you don't mind sending that out, you can tell them that's from me. That'll be great. Just don't tell your dad you're doing it during worship. Also, I wanted to, I meant to say this morning, but Wednesday night, our ladies, Tara is starting a ladies class, for our core group, our ladies up in the, what is now the teenage girls classroom, which is this corner room over here. So Wednesday nights, they have a book that they have, and they're going to start a class up there. So that's starting August the 3rd. And I need a teacher for K through 3rd on Wednesday night. It's going to be held in the fellowship room. Everything will be laid out for you. And it really, there probably needs to be 2 or 3 of you. But if you're willing to jump on that, we really need a teacher, K through 3rd, in there. I'm going to teach the 4th through 6th grade up in their room. Of course, Caleb's got the 7th through 12th, and I can't remember who's below kindergarten, but we really need K through 3rd. I'm going to go ahead and give you a heads up. There's a lot of them, and they're crazy. But you can't let little kids scare you. David, you want to do it? Huh? So if you will talk to me about that, we need somebody on Wednesday night. They don't need to be in here, and we need to have that K through 3rd. So please see me on that. Anything else? All right, let's pray. Father, we do come before you, thanking you for this opportunity that we have tonight just to come and to study a little bit more about you. Father, help us as mom and dads, as grandparents, do what we can to continue to help our kids, to give them the right instruction, to lead them in the right way. Father, to prepare them, to give them a manual for this new life that they are about to begin, and as they start the new school year, as they just do things that are the same, but Father, that we just try to encourage them to be a little bit better, to be a better version of themselves, which is you, to live their life like your son Jesus. And Father, be with all those who are sick. Be with them, watch over them. There's so many that are on our hearts that we give to you. Just be with them, give them the strength. Father, there are many who spiritually just still are in need of you, that just needs to be shaken, that needs to be woke up. Father, just help us as a church, as a family, to do that out of love, to go out, to reach them. Father, not to be timid, but just to tell people that we miss them. And Father, keep us safe. In your son's name we pray. Amen.